How did Native Americans survive the coldest winters without firewood? Their methods are amazing. Imagine the endless Great Plains, frozen under a leaden sky. The temperature drops to -40, and the piercing wind leaves no chance to warm up. In these conditions, where the only fuel seems to be sparse shrubs, the indigenous peoples of America did not just survive, they lived, keeping warm and maintaining their way of life for thousands of years. We are used to thinking that survival in such cold weather is impossible without a huge, cheerfully crackling fire. But what if I told you that a large fire was more of a luxury and sometimes a deadly mistake? Their secrets were much deeper and more ingenious than just the ability to make fire. They learned to turn the wind from an enemy into an ally, using the heat of the earth and their own breath as part of a heating system. Watch the video to the end to learn how Native Americans built their homes to accumulate heat and why bison fat was as valuable in winter as it was in summer. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of survival in the winter cold. Contrary to popular belief, a huge fire in the center of a teepee or at the entrance to a dwelling was a path to disaster, not salvation. This is the first and most important misconception that prevents us from understanding their ingenious system. A large fire consumed a huge amount of precious fuel, which was almost non-existent on the plains. Every dry branch was worth its weight in gold, and it would have been madness to waste it on creating a beautiful but inefficient flame. Resources had to be stretched to last for the long winter months. In addition, a strong fire created a powerful draft. It pulled warm air out of the dwelling through the smoke hole while sucking in icy air from below. As a result, it became even colder at the feet, and all the heat escaped into the sky. The smoke from a large fire was an excellent way to give away one's location. In conditions where intertribal conflicts continued even in winter, revealing one's location meant bringing trouble to the camp. A quiet and inconspicuous existence was the key to safety. The real skill was not in lighting a large fire, but in maintaining a small but maximally effective hearth. It had to provide just enough heat to warm a small space. This principle of energy conservation was perfected. Their heating system was complex, with a small fire being just one element. The main role was played not by firewood, but by proper insulation, the design of the dwelling, and the use of alternative heat sources. The fire only helped this system to work. They understood that retaining heat was much more important than constantly producing new heat. This fundamental principle formed the basis of their entire winter survival strategy. That is why they were able to survive winters that would have seemed deadly to anyone else. So forget about pictures of huge bonfires. The reality was much more prosaic and intelligent. A small hearth the size of a few coals, providing precious warmth, is the true symbol of survival. This approach required a deep understanding of the physics of heat and the properties of materials. Indigenous peoples were not just hunters, but true engineers whose knowledge was passed down from generation to generation. Their laboratory was nature itself. We would love to hear your opinion. What do you think about this approach to saving resources compared to modern heating methods? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about how a seemingly simple dwelling was transformed into an impregnable fortress against the cold? The Tipi, which many consider to be just a summer tent, was in fact a perfectly designed machine for surviving the most severe frosts. Its construction is a masterpiece of engineering. The secret began with its shape. The conical structure gave the Tipi incredible resistance to the hurricane-force winds of the Great Plains. The wind did not press against the wall, but flowed around it, without blowing away precious heat. The angle of the poles also played an important role. The teepee was not a symmetrical cone, its rear side was steeper, while the front was more gradual. This allowed it to more effectively withstand the prevailing westerly winds. Inside the teepee was another inner lining known as an ozon. It was attached to the poles at human height and descended to the floor. This simple detail created an air gap, functioning like modern double-glazed windows. This air cushion between the outer covering and the ozon was a key element of insulation. It prevented cold outside air from entering and warm air from escaping. It was a simple but ingenious thermal barrier. At the bottom along the perimeter of the teepee, skins, brushwood, or even turf were laid. This sealed the base of the dwelling. Cold air could not blow in from below, creating drafts. In the center was a small hearth, directly under the smoke hole at the top. Warm air from the fire rose, circulating in the space between the ozon and the walls. It displaced the cold air and evenly heated the entire interior. The famous ears, or smoke valves, at the top of the teepee were a fine-tuning system. With the help of special poles, they could be turned depending on the direction of the wind. This created optimal draft for the smoke, preventing it from filling the dwelling. Thus, the teepee was not just a shelter, but an active climate control system. Each of its elements was well thought out and performed its function. Together, they created a comfortable and warm microclimate, even in the harshest blizzard. But the structure itself was just a frame. Are you ready to find out what unique material turned this frame into real armor against the cold, and how one animal provided the Indians with everything they needed for the winter? What I am about to show you will turn your whole idea of survival upside down. For the peoples of the plains, the bison was not just a source of food. It was a walking universal survival kit, and it was the key to wintering without an abundance of firewood. Let's start with the teepee cover. It was sewn from dozens of carefully processed bison hides. The wool on the hides was not shaved off completely. It was left short and served as an additional layer of insulation, trapping air. The processing made the hides waterproof. The smoke from the hearth inside the teepee further impregnated and preserved them. As a result, the covering did not get wet from wet snow and did not crack in the cold. But the most interesting thing is the fuel. When there was no firewood, the main source of fuel was dried bison dung, known as buffalo chips. It provided slow, even heat and produced almost no smoke, which was ideal for the hearth in the teepee. Women collected these droppings throughout the summer and fall, creating strategic reserves for the winter. These dry patties burned long and hot. Without this alternative fuel, life on the treeless plains would have been impossible. Bison fat was another vital resource. It was melted and poured into stone lamps with moss as wicks. Such a lamp provided not only light, but also a little heat, enough to maintain a comfortable temperature in a well-insulated teepee. The same fat was a high-calorie food that helped keep people warm from the inside. Mixed with dried meat and berries, it was turned into pemmican, an energy concentrate ideal for winter. It was fuel not for the hearth, but for the human body itself. Even bison bones were put to use. They were boiled for many hours to extract the marrow and fat. This broth was incredibly nutritious and warming. Thick winter hides were used to make not only covers for teepees, but also warm clothing and bedding. Sleeping under a heavy bison robe on a bed of hides kept people warm even on the coldest nights. The warmth of the human body accumulated under these layers. Thus, a single species of animal provided indigenous peoples with everything they needed. It provided shelter, clothing, light, fuel, and food. It was a perfect symbiosis between man and nature, honed over millennia. What if I told you that everything you've been taught about winter clothing was known to Native Americans hundreds of years ago? The principle of layering, which is promoted today by manufacturers of outdoor clothing, was the basis of their winter wardrobe. They intuitively understood that several thin layers keep you warmer than one thick layer. The basis was clothing made from softly tanned deer or elk skin. Shirts, leggings, and dresses were not very warm on their own, but they formed the first layer. Their task was to wick moisture away from the body. On top of this, they wore additional clothing, often with the fur facing inwards. The air trapped between the fur fibers created an excellent insulating layer. It was the same principle as modern fleece jackets. The main element of winter clothing was the bison robe. It was a large, heavy cloak made from a single bison hide, killed in winter when its fur was at its thickest. It was worn with the fur inside, covering the entire body from head to toe. This robe was versatile. During the day, it served as outerwear, protecting against wind and snow. At night, it turned into a warm blanket. Footwear was also carefully designed. Winter moccasins were made tall, almost like boots. Insoles made of dry grass or rabbit fur were placed inside for additional insulation from the cold ground. The dry grass in the moccasins not only provided warmth, but also absorbed sweat. Feet remained dry, which was critical for preventing frostbite. This grass padding was changed regularly. Hands were protected with mittens made of beaver fur or other animals with thick undercoats. Heads were covered with hoods, which were often part of shirts or capes. Protecting the extremities and head was a priority. All clothing was loosely cut so as not to restrict movement or blood circulation. Clothing that was too tight in the cold was a sure way to freeze. Air had to circulate freely between layers of clothing. This system was incredibly effective. It allowed the body to retain heat even in very low temperatures and strong winds. But how did they turn stiff, board-like skins into soft and durable clothing material? Turning raw hides into soft, durable, and water-resistant leather was a complex and laborious process. The women of the tribe had mastered this art. The comfort and survival of the entire family depended directly on their skills. The first step was cleaning. The skin was stretched out on the ground or on a special frame and carefully scraped with bone or stone scrapers to remove any remaining fat and meat. This step required great physical strength and precision. Then the skin was soaked in water to soften it. After that, it was stretched again, and the wool was removed unless it was needed for winter clothing. For this, another type of scraper, a blunter one, was used. The most important stage was tanning, which made the skin soft and durable. Indigenous peoples used the so-called brain method. The brain of a killed animal was mixed with water and liver to create a paste. This paste was thoroughly rubbed into the entire surface of the skin. The enzymes contained in the brain tissue broke down the collagen fibers in the skin. This made it elastic and prevented rotting. After impregnation, the skin was kneaded and stretched in all directions. It was rubbed against a stretched rope, pulled over the edge of a log, or simply kneaded by hand. This process could take many hours. Mechanical processing was critically important. It prevented the skin fibers from sticking together and hardening again as they dried. This is what made the skin soft, like fabric. To make the skin water-resistant and durable, it was smoked. The skin was sewn into a bag and placed on a frame made of branches over a pit of smoldering coals. The smoke permeated the leather, darkening it and protecting it from moisture. Different types of smoke produced different colors and properties. Smoke from rotten wood made the leather especially soft and gave it a beautiful golden hue. This process also repelled insects. The result was a material that was ideal for harsh conditions. It was light, durable, breathable, and warm. This ancient technological process was as effective as modern methods. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of Native American homes? Not all indigenous peoples lived in tipis. In the Northeast, in dense forests where winters were just as harsh, the Iroquois built completely different dwellings, the famous longhouses. These houses were real communal fortresses against the cold. They were long, up to 60 meters, frame structures covered with elm bark. Several dozen families of one clan could spend the winter in one such house. The secret to their warmth lay in collective living. A large number of people in one enclosed space generated a huge amount of heat. It was a simple and effective way to reduce heating costs. Several hearths were located along the central passageway of the house. The smoke escaped through holes in the roof. One such hearth heated 2 families living on either side of it. The bark walls were not the only insulation. In the fall, the base of the house was covered with earth and turf on the outside. This created a thick barrier that kept out cold winds and drafts. Inside the house, 2-tiered bunks were arranged along the walls. The lower tier was used for sleeping, and the upper tier was used for storing supplies and belongings. These supplies also served as additional insulation for the walls. Other forest peoples, such as the Algonquians, built wigwams. These were dome-shaped or conical dwellings with a frame made of flexible trunks. In winter, they were covered with several layers of bark, reed mats, and skins. An air gap was also formed between the layers of covering, which acted as insulation. The base of the wigwam, like that of a longhouse, was insulated with snow, earth, or branches. The small size of the wigwam allowed it to be quickly heated from a small hearth. These dwellings were ideally suited to the forest environment, where building materials and firewood were abundant. They demonstrate how different peoples found unique architectural solutions to the same climatic challenges. But how did they heat these spaces without turning them into smoky traps? Even in a well-insulated dwelling, a fire could not burn all night. It was both dangerous and wasteful. Therefore, indigenous peoples used a technology that allowed them to accumulate heat and release it slowly over many hours. The main element of this system was ordinary stones. In the evening, while the central hearth was still burning, several large boulders were heated. The stones were carefully selected. They had to be able to withstand high temperatures without cracking. When the stones were red hot, they were carefully removed from the fire with wooden tongs or pitchforks. They were then placed in different parts of the dwelling. It was a kind of distributed heating system. The hot stones radiated a soft, pleasant heat throughout the night. Unlike an open fire, they did not produce smoke and did not require constant supervision. It was safe and effective. Several such stones placed under the sleeping platforms turned the bed into something like a modern heated bed. They heated not the air, but the bed itself. Sleeping on such a bed was warm and comfortable. Small heated stones could be wrapped in a piece of leather and used as an individual hot water bottle. They were placed in the bosom or at the feet to keep warm. This method was indispensable for the elderly and infirm. This technology was also used for cooking. A fire was lit in a pit dug in the ground, on which stones were heated. Then the coals were removed, the pit was lined with grass, meat was placed on top, covered with grass and hot stones again, and all this was covered with earth. After a few hours, the meat was ready. It was not fried, but baked or stewed in its own juice. This method did not require a constant fire and preserved all the nutrients. The hot stone technology is a striking example of how simple natural materials can be used to solve complex problems. It allowed the heat from the fire to be used efficiently, extending its effect for many hours. It was a real Stone Age heat battery. It was another key to survival when firewood was scarce. The heat from a single fire was used twice, first for direct heating and then in the form of energy stored in the stones. Survival in winter depended not only on external sources of heat, but also on internal ones. A proper diet was as important an element of heating as a warm home or clothing. Food was fuel for the internal engine of the human body. The basis of the winter diet was high-calorie food rich in fats and proteins. There were few carbohydrates. It was fats that gave the body maximum energy, which was used, among other things, to maintain a constant body temperature. The main winter food was pemmican. This unique invention of the indigenous peoples was the ideal food for survival. It consisted of three main components: dried meat, rendered fat, and sometimes dried berries. Bison or deer meat was cut into thin strips and dried in the sun or over a slow fire until it became brittle. Then it was ground into powder. This powder was mixed with melted fat in a ratio of about 1:1. The resulting mixture was incredibly nutritious and could be stored for a very long time. A small piece of pemmican could sustain a person's strength for an entire day. It was an ancient energy bar, perfectly balanced for survival in cold weather. In addition to pemmican, large quantities of dried and smoked meat were prepared. It was stored in special bags made of rawhide, called parfleche. These supplies were a strategic reserve in case of a long and harsh winter. Hunting in winter was difficult, but it did not stop. Hunting an animal with a thick layer of subcutaneous fat was a great success. This fat was highly valued and eaten first. Fish was also an important part of the winter diet, especially for peoples living near rivers and lakes. Ice fishing allowed for a more varied diet. Fish, like meat, was dried and smoked for future use. Plant-based foods were not forgotten either. In the fall, edible roots, nuts, and berries were gathered and dried. They were a source of vitamins, which were so lacking in winter. Such a diet, rich in fats and proteins, allowed the body to generate enough heat to withstand the most severe frosts. The body warmed itself from within. This was the foundation without which no external measures would have helped. A successful winter began long before the first snowfall. Choosing the right location for the winter camp was half the battle. It was a strategic decision on which the lives of all members of the community depended. The camp was never set up in an open, windswept place. Preference was given to deep river valleys, forest-covered ravines, or the foothills. The main task was to protect against the prevailing winds. Proximity to water was a prerequisite, but it had to be a river with a fairly fast current that did not freeze to the bottom. This guaranteed access to drinking water throughout the winter. The availability of fuel was also an important factor. The ideal location was a grove of poplars or willows growing in a river floodplain. Even a small number of trees provided a supply of firewood for the coldest days. The camp was positioned so that it faced south. This allowed maximum use of the sparse winter sun. The sun's rays provided a little extra warmth and light, which was important for both physical and mental well-being. The dwellings in the winter camp were placed closer together than in summer. This provided additional protection from the wind. The outer tipis took the brunt of the elements, protecting those in the center. Winter was a time of relative calm. Military campaigns and large migrations ceased. People tried to spend as much time as possible inside their dwellings, conserving energy and heat. Daily activity was kept to a minimum. Men repaired weapons and equipment. Women sewed clothes, processed skins, and prepared food. This was a time when the community became united. Joint resistance to harsh conditions brought people closer together. Helping neighbors was not just a kind gesture, but a necessary condition for the survival of the community. Thus, the wintering strategy was comprehensive. It included choosing the right location, a special camp layout, and a change in the rhythm of life. It was a plan that had been thought out and refined over centuries. In addition to ingenious dwellings, warm clothing, and a proper diet, indigenous peoples had another, perhaps the most important, tool for survival. This tool was intangible. It consisted of knowledge, traditions, and a special psychological attitude. Their knowledge of nature was encyclopedic. Every adult member of the tribe knew which wood burned longer and gave off more heat, where to find dry branches under the snow, and how to predict the approach of a blizzard by the behavior of the clouds. This knowledge was passed down by word of mouth. Winter was a time for stories. The elders gathered the young people around them and told the myths, legends, and traditions of their people. This was not just entertainment, but a way of passing on experience, moral norms, and a sense of community. Long winter evenings were devoted to crafts. Creating beautiful and functional items, from embroidered clothing to painted quivers for arrows, was a form of meditation. It helped pass the dark hours and maintain mental balance. The social structure of the tribe was key to survival. Hunters shared their prey with everyone, so no one went hungry. Caring for the elderly and those who could not provide for themselves was a sacred duty. Psychological resilience was a quality that was instilled from childhood. Children were taught to endure cold and deprivation without complaint. The ability to remain calm and clear-headed in the most critical situations was vital. They perceived winter not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a natural part of the annual cycle. They did not fight it, but adapted to its laws. This philosophical approach helped them avoid despair and fear. Games and rituals also played an important role. They helped maintain morale and social connections. Even in the most severe frosts, life in the camp did not come to a complete standstill. A sense of humor and the ability to laugh at difficulties were another defense mechanism. This prevented despondency from taking hold of people. Laughter warmed them as well as fire. Ultimately, their main secret was not a single technology, but a holistic system. It was a system where material culture, social organization, and spiritual values worked together. It was this unity that allowed them to survive and thrive in the harshest conditions. We see that the survival of Native Americans in cold winters was the result not of brute force, but of deep intelligence and harmony with nature. They created a remarkably effective energy-saving system, where every element, from the shape of the teepee to the composition of pemmican, played its part. Their approach to life was based on conserving resources, not mindless consumption. Their legacy is not just exotic details of everyday life, but a valuable lesson for the modern world. A lesson about how to live comfortably without harming the environment, and how knowledge of the laws of nature can be more important than the most sophisticated technologies. They proved that the main tool for survival has always been and remains the human mind. What other aspects of the lives of the indigenous peoples of America would you like to see in our next issues? Perhaps you are interested in their military tactics, belief systems, or art. Suggest your topics in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new research into the mysteries of the past.